On an autumn afternoon in Massachusetts, Rebecca Foster sat in her living room watching the final fitting of her daughter Emily's wedding dress. Emily had grown into an attractive young woman with beautiful brown hair inherited from her mother and intelligent eyes inherited from her father. "What do you think, Mom?" Emily asked, spinning around in front of the mirror. "Perfect, Emily. You're truly beautiful," Rebecca answered with tears in her eyes. In all the years she had watched her daughter grow up, there were few moments as happy as this one. Light footsteps could be heard from the kitchen. Mark came carrying 3 mugs of homemade hot chocolate. He was an impressive man with silver hair and a gentle smile, successful as an investment consultant. Although only 2 years had passed since he married Rebecca, he had naturally fit into the family as if he had been a member for decades. "Special drinks for the princess," Mark said, offering Emily a mug. "I made one for your father too, so please give it to him later." Emily smiled and accepted it. "Thank you, Mark. Dad will be so pleased." Rebecca's heart was warmed by her husband's thoughtfulness. 12 years had passed since the divorce, and her relationship with her ex-husband James Foster had been maintained amicably for the children's sake. James remained a loving father to Emily and Ryan. And surprisingly, a relationship of mutual respect had developed between Mark and James. "Isn't Ryan home yet?" Mark asked, looking out the window. "Soccer practice seems to be running late." "But he should be home soon," Rebecca replied. Her son, in his final year of high school, was leading busy days balancing sports and academics. Emily continued talking while taking off her wedding dress and changing into casual clothes. "I can't believe Dad and Mark are planning the bachelor party together. I was worried at first, but now I'm happy to see them getting along so well." Indeed, this was a rare situation. Many divorced couples struggle with relationships involving new partners, but Rebecca's family was different. Mark's generosity, James's mature attitude, and above all, both parents' commitment to prioritizing their children's happiness had made this harmony possible. The sound of the front door opening announced Ryan's return home. "I'm home," he appeared in his sweaty uniform. "Emily, how did the dress fitting go?" "Perfect." Emily waved at Ryan. "Don't forget your final tuxedo check too." Mark placed his hand on Ryan's shoulder. "Your father said he wants to go look at tuxedos together tomorrow. Would it be okay if I came along too?" "Of course, Mark," Ryan answered with a smile. "If the 3 of us go together, we'll definitely make the best choice." Rebecca watched this family scene while savoring feelings of gratitude deep in her heart. At the time of the divorce, she had worried about the impact on the children and felt anxious about her own future. However, as time passed, she learned that even when the form of a family changes, the bonds of love are never lost. Through her work as a psychological counselor, Rebecca had seen many broken families and understood how blessed her own family was. The children had overcome their parents' divorce and were growing up healthily in their new family structure. And meeting Mark, such a wonderful man, also felt like a gift from life. "Mom, what are you thinking about?" Emily asked, noticing her mother's expression. "I was just thinking about how happy we are," Rebecca smiled. "Your wedding will be the beginning of a new chapter for our family. And it's also proof of the bonds we've built together." As dinner time approached, the whole family gathered around the dining table. Mark helped with cooking, Emily and Ryan set the table, and Rebecca made final confirmations for tomorrow's wedding. There was the ordinary but warm and happy daily life of a family. In early October, 3 weeks before the wedding, Rebecca's house was in the midst of bustling preparations. On the living room coffee table, reply cards from wedding invitations were piled high, and Emily and Rebecca were carefully checking them one by one. "Mark's idea for welcome drinks is really wonderful," Emily said while organizing the reply cards. "He truly understands our family well." Rebecca smiled. Mark had been providing more active and creative ideas for the wedding preparations than even her biological father would have. His meticulousness as an investment consultant and his warm personality that valued human connections were fully displayed during this preparation period. "He's truly thoughtful. He loves you children as if you were his own," Rebecca answered with heartfelt gratitude. From the kitchen came the voices of Mark and Ryan discussing the seating arrangement for the venue. Mark was drawing a floor plan of the venue on large paper, working with Ryan to consider the placement of each table. "Would here be good for Grandpa and Grandma, where they can hear the music easily?" Ryan suggested, marking with a pencil. "That's a good idea," Mark nodded with satisfaction. "Let's also arrange for your father's parents to sit where they can see Emily well. We want the whole family to enjoy this special day." Rebecca was once again moved by Mark's thoughtfulness as she listened to their conversation. He wasn't just staying in the role of stepfather, but was demonstrating true leadership in considering the harmony of the entire family. In the afternoon, James appeared as promised. The relationship with her ex-husband had been maintained well after the divorce, but since Mark joined the family, an even more constructive cooperative relationship had been built. The sight of three adults working together for the children's happiness was praised by those around them. "There's a final confirmation from the florist about Emily's bouquet," James said, taking out documents. "It looks like the combination of white roses and baby's breath will turn out just as you hoped." "Thank you, Dad," Emily hugged her father. "The florist you chose gives us really wonderful ideas." Mark also placed his hand on James's shoulder. "Thanks to your connections with the florist, we'll have truly beautiful arrangements. Emily is lucky." Rebecca watched this scene with complex emotions in her heart. It was a scene she could never have imagined 12 years ago during the divorce. At that time, she was hurt, angry, and desperate. But now, three people were cooperating to support Emily's happiness. She felt the mystery of life and the healing power of time. "The final check of the sound system is done too," James continued. "Emily's music list is perfect. Especially the first dance song, it's going to be really moving." Emily smiled shyly. "I chose it together with my fiancé David. It's the song that was playing where we first met." "It'll be a wonderful memory," Mark said warmly. "A new chapter of your love story is beginning." That night, Rebecca sat alone drinking evening tea, reflecting on the days that had passed. Through her work as a psychological counselor, she had seen many family difficulties. Divorce, remarriage, stepfamily problems, children's adaptation difficulties. She had faced countless complex situations. But her own family had been fortunate. Mark came down the stairs and sat beside her. "What are you thinking about?" "I was thinking about how blessed we are." Rebecca took her husband's hand. "Everything became perfect when you joined our family." "Meeting you and the children has been the best thing in my life," Mark answered gently. "Emily and Ryan are truly wonderful children. James is an admirable man too. I'm deeply grateful to be included in the family bonds you've built." The next day, a final preparation meeting was held. Emily, Ryan, Rebecca, Mark, and James all gathered together to confirm the wedding details. Seating charts, time schedules, emergency contact systems, photography arrangements, everything was perfectly organized. "Mom, Dad, and Mark," Emily said tearfully. "Thank you so much for working so hard for me. I'll be the happiest bride in the world." Ryan also said emotionally, "Our family may have an unusual form, but it's full of love. I think Emily's wedding will deepen our bonds even more." James looked around at Rebecca and Mark. "Thanks to you too, the children have been able to grow up healthily. I was worried when we first divorced, but now I think it turned out for the best." "Thank you." Mark stood up and looked around at everyone. Family isn't determined only by blood relationships. It's built with love, respect, and caring for each other. I think we've proven that. The night before the wedding, Rebecca visited her daughter's room. Emily was sitting on her bed, making final checks on the accessories she would wear tomorrow. "Are you nervous?" Rebecca sat beside her daughter. "A little," Emily answered honestly. "But I'll be fine because my whole family is supporting me. Mom, I'm really glad you remarried and Mark became part of our family. And that Dad and Mark get along so well. We've all worked hard for you and Ryan's happiness." Rebecca held her daughter's hand. "Tomorrow will be a special day for our family. A new family will be born, and our bonds will become even stronger." That night, Rebecca went to sleep with deep satisfaction and gratitude. Everything was perfectly prepared for tomorrow's wedding, surrounded by loved ones, and she couldn't ask for more. Emily's wedding day was a beautiful autumn day, like something from a picture book. The Massachusetts sky was crystal clear, and autumn-colored trees decorated the venue's garden. The historic Elmwood Manor was a special place for Rebecca's family. It was also a place full of memories where Rebecca and James had once come on dates. At 10 in the morning, Rebecca was helping with the final preparations in her daughter's dressing room. Emily was dressed in a pure white silk dress, shining beautifully like an angel. The moment when mother and daughter smiled at each other through the mirror was one of the most precious moments in Rebecca's life. "Mom, I'm truly happy," Emily said, holding her mother's hand. "To be able to get married surrounded by such a wonderful family feels like a dream." "If you're happy, then I'm happy," Rebecca answered with tears in her eyes. "Today will be the most beautiful day of your life." At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, guests began arriving one after another. Rebecca greeted guests at the reception while being moved again by the beauty of the venue. The flower decorations Mark had arranged were breathtakingly beautiful, and the music flowing from the sound system James had chosen wrapped the entire venue in an elegant atmosphere. Mark looked handsome in his tailcoat, like a movie star. He walked around the venue, confirming that everything was proceeding perfectly. Rebecca watched her husband with feelings of gratitude from the bottom of her heart. "Rebecca." At the familiar voice from behind, she turned to see her ex-husband James standing there. He was dressed in a navy blue suit, appropriately attired for his daughter's wedding. However, Rebecca sensed something different in his expression. Instead of his usual gentle smile, he wore a somewhat tense, anxious expression. "James, thank you for your hard work," Rebecca greeted him brightly. "It's a lovely day. Emily has been so happy since this morning." James's gaze was directed behind Rebecca. Mark could be seen making final flower adjustments. At that moment, James's face suddenly turned pale. As if he had seen a ghost, his body began to tremble slightly. "James? What's wrong?" Rebecca asked worriedly. "That man is..." James's voice was shaking. "Your husband is..." Mark approached them. "James, thank you for coming today. Emily was looking forward to seeing you." However, when James saw Mark's face, he began trembling even more violently. His face turned completely white, and cold sweat appeared on his forehead. "You're definitely..." James stumbled over his words. "This is our first meeting, isn't it?" Mark smiled gently while extending his hand. "Let me introduce myself again, I'm Mark Johnson. As Rebecca's husband, pleased to meet you." James stared at Mark's hand without trying to shake it. His breathing became rough, and he was clearly in a panic state. "Excuse me, I need to." James suddenly turned his back and began walking toward the venue exit. "James, wait," Rebecca chased after him. "What's wrong? Are you feeling ill?" However, James left the venue quickly without looking back. Rebecca stood there in confusion. Mark also approached with a worried expression. "What happened?" Mark tilted his head. Was he feeling unwell? The guests at the venue were also confused by James's sudden departure. Emily noticed too and came running over with concern. "Mom, where's Dad? Why did he rush out like that?" I don't know, Rebecca tried to reassure her daughter. He must have had some urgent business. Don't worry, he'll be back soon. However, anxiety was spreading deep in Rebecca's heart. James's reaction was clearly abnormal. It was as if he felt fear upon seeing Mark. But that was impossible. Mark and James were supposed to be meeting for the first time. The wedding proceeded as scheduled. However, James didn't return. Rebecca tried to focus on not ruining her daughter's special day while worrying. The exchange of vows between Emily and David was beautiful, and the guests were moved. But dark clouds hung over Rebecca's heart. During the reception, Rebecca called James many times, but he didn't answer. Mark sensed his wife's worry and stayed by her side to support her. It must be some misunderstanding, Mark said gently. James is a good man. Tomorrow, he'll surely explain everything. Late at night, when Rebecca and Mark returned home, Rebecca's cell phone received a message. The sender was James. Rebecca, I'm sorry about today. However, there's something I must tell you. I want to meet as soon as possible, in a safe place. I've learned a terrible truth about your husband. For your daughter's sake too, run away now. Your husband isn't the kind of person you think he is. I want to tell you the details in person. Come alone. I'll be waiting at the bench in Waterfront Park tomorrow at 10 a.m. Believe me, this isn't a joke. Rebecca almost dropped her cell phone. Her hands were shaking, and her heart was beating violently. She looked at Mark, who was changing clothes next to her. Her gentle, caring husband, the stepfather who loved the children, the perfect family member. But James's message seemed to say that all of it was fiction. What's wrong? Mark turned around with concern. Oh, nothing, Rebecca answered in a trembling voice. I'm just a little tired. That night, Rebecca couldn't sleep at all. She read James's message over and over, trying to understand its meaning. However, no matter how she thought about it, she couldn't believe it. Mark was the perfect husband. What terrible secret could he possibly have? Looking at Mark's sleeping face beside her, Rebecca fell into deep confusion. Rebecca would spend until dawn with anxiety. The next morning, Rebecca headed to Waterfront Park with heavy steps. She had lied to Mark, saying she had a brunch appointment with a friend before leaving the house. Deep in her heart, she prayed that James's warning was just a misunderstanding. However, his abnormal reaction yesterday wouldn't leave her mind. When she found James sitting on the park bench, Rebecca was surprised by his haggard appearance. It was clear he hadn't slept all night, and his usual calm expression was nowhere to be seen. James, Rebecca sat beside him. What exactly happened yesterday? Emily was very worried too. James sighed deeply. Rebecca, what I have to tell you is very painful. But you must know the truth. He took out a thick file with trembling hands. It's about your husband, Mark Johnson. What about Mark? Rebecca was puzzled. He's not the kind of person you think he is, James said with a serious expression. Actually, we knew each other 12 years ago. We worked at the same engineering company. Rebecca's heart almost stopped. That's impossible. Mark is an investment consultant, and you two met for the first time. He's lying, James opened the file. Look at this. The first document was an employee roster from Tech Solutions from 12 years ago. There, indeed, were the names James Foster and Mark Johnson listed together. Rebecca stared at the documents in disbelief. Mark was in the company's IT security department at the time, James continued. And he had developed an abnormal obsession with you. From the time we got married, he began planning to win you over. That's ridiculous, Rebecca's voice shook. Then why did he appear 10 years after our divorce? James turned to the next page. Because he was carefully planning. First, he needed to destroy our marriage. The documents contain detailed records about Rebecca and James's divorce proceedings. Evidence, photos of infidelity, witness testimonies, financial records, all the materials that had been decisive factors in the divorce at the time were laid out. Do you remember these infidelity evidence photos? James pointed to the photos with a trembling finger. Rebecca nodded with bitter memories. Photos of James talking intimately with an unknown woman, photos of them holding hands and leaving a restaurant. Based on this evidence, she had become convinced of her husband's infidelity and decided on divorce. All these photos were composites, James said quietly. They were fakes that Mark created using his IT skills. I never had an affair. Rebecca was speechless. But there were witnesses too. People who saw you meeting with that woman. Those witnesses were also actors Mark hired. James showed her another document. This is a record from a temp agency at the time. There's evidence that Mark hired multiple people as extras for filming. Rebecca's head was confused. Memories from 12 years ago came flooding back. The people who testified in the divorce proceedings, their unnaturally detailed memories, the decisive moments that were somehow photographed. She hadn't noticed at the time, but thinking about it now, it was indeed unnatural. Furthermore, my work troubles were also his doing, James continued. Important project data disappearing, business negotiations being sabotaged. Mark was manipulating everything from the company's system. Why? Why go to such lengths? Rebecca asked with tears in her eyes. His abnormal obsession with you, James answered sadly. He was a man who would use any means necessary to win you. And even after we divorced, he was monitoring you to ensure you wouldn't have relationships with other men. James showed the next piece of evidence. It was a record of Rebecca's activities over the past 10 years. Her workplace, meetings with friends, even her dating partners were recorded in surprising detail. Do you remember the men you dated? James asked. After meeting a few times, they all suddenly stopped contacting you. Rebecca remembered. After the divorce, she had dated several men, but all relationships ended after short periods. The men would suddenly become cold, or have to move for work reasons. The reasons varied, but none lasted long. Mark threatened them or harassed them to drive them away from you, James explained. When you became lonely, he appeared at the perfect timing. You're saying he monitored me for 10 years? Rebecca trembled with fear. That's not all, James took out the final documents. Mark created a perfect false identity to get close to you. His career as an investment consultant, his education, all lies. The documents showed Mark's real background. He was indeed a former engineer who had been fired from the company 10 years ago. After that, he hadn't held steady employment and had been making a living through fraudulent investment schemes using multiple false names. I can't believe it, Rebecca held her head. But I've met his work colleagues, and I've seen his office. All staged, James answered. The fake office he rented, the fake colleagues he hired. Everything was cleverly arranged to deceive you. Rebecca thought back over the past 2 years of married life. There were indeed unnatural points. Conversations with Mark's colleagues were superficial, and when she asked about details of his work, only vague answers came back. However, wrapped in his kindness and love, such small doubts didn't matter. Yesterday, the moment I saw him at the ceremony, I remembered everything, James said with a tired expression. I had been investigating the truth for a long time. I wanted to protect you, but the evidence was insufficient. However, I finally obtained decisive proof. Rebecca stood up and walked around the park. It felt like the world was crumbling. Her beloved husband, the married life she thought was perfect, everything was a cleverly orchestrated lie. What should I do? Rebecca asked in a voice that seemed squeezed out. First, ensure your safety, James answered seriously. Mark is a man who continued planning for 12 years because of his obsession with you. If he realizes the truth is known, there's no telling what he might do. But what about Emily and Ryan? They love Mark. I'm worried about the children's safety too. James stood up. I'm consulting with a lawyer and preparing to take legal action. You should also consult with a trustworthy lawyer. Rebecca was afraid to go home. Could she face Mark and act normally? However, thinking of the children, she couldn't avoid going. Tonight, I'm going to talk with Mark. Rebecca steeled her resolve. I want to confirm the truth. It's dangerous, James worried. Confronting him alone. I'll be fine. I've lived with him for 2 years. If everything really is a lie, I'll know from his reaction. That night, Rebecca sat facing Mark in the living room with trembling hands. Mark, we need to talk. Mark wore his usual calm expression, but seemed to sense something from Rebecca's serious tone. What's wrong? Is there something you're worried about? Who are you really? Rebecca asked in a trembling voice. Are you Mark Johnson who worked at Tech Solutions? At that moment, Mark's expression completely changed. His gentle smile disappeared, replaced by cold, calculating eyes. It was as if a mask had fallen away. When did you figure it out? Mark stood up and looked out the window. Did James tell you? So it was all true, Rebecca said, holding back tears. The 12-year plan, the forged evidence, monitoring me, everything. Mark turned around and looked at Rebecca with a completely different expression. I loved you. I still love you. That's not a lie. Love? You call this love? Rebecca stood up. Destroying my life and continuing to deceive the children? It was for your happiness. Mark took a step closer. James wasn't worthy of you. I could cherish you better. You were happy these past 2 years, weren't you? Happiness built on lies has no meaning. Rebecca backed away. You're sick. You need help. A light of madness appeared in Mark's eyes. You can't leave me. Do you think I know how much time and effort I've invested in you? Rebecca reached for her cell phone, but Mark quickly snatched it away. Going to call the police. We're married. This is a domestic matter. At that moment, the sound of the front door opening was heard. Ryan had come home from school. Mom, I'm home. Rebecca and Mark tensed momentarily. Mark quickly composed his expression, returning to his usual kind stepfather face. Welcome home, Ryan. Mark acted naturally. Do you have homework? However, Rebecca couldn't put her son in danger. Ryan, go to your room immediately. Call your father and have him come pick you up right away. Ryan noticed his mother's unusual state. Mom, what's wrong? Right now, Rebecca said in a strong tone. 3 days later, Rebecca was at a law office. Together with James, she was proceeding with damage compensation claims against Mark. Mark would also be criminally charged for fraud, stalking, perjury, and other crimes. There appear to be other victims who were deceived by Mark's fake investment company, the lawyer explained. As the police investigation progresses, even more crimes will likely be revealed. 6 months later, Mark was convicted on multiple charges, and Rebecca was awarded substantial compensation. Mark's credibility as an investment consultant was completely destroyed, and he was permanently banned from the industry. A restraining order was also issued, and he could never approach Rebecca or the children again. Emily and Ryan were initially shocked to learn their stepfather's true identity. However, as time passed, they came to understand the true meaning of family bonds. Mom, we were deceived, but our love as a family was real, Emily said, hugging her mother. I'm happy that Dad and Mom fought together for us. Rebecca and James didn't reconcile. 12 years had changed them into different people. However, knowing the truth deepened their mutual respect and understanding. "We may not have been good spouses, but we can be good parents," James said. "Let's continue cooperating for the children's sake." A year later, Rebecca was walking a new path in life. Through her work as a psychological counselor, she was supporting women who had suffered similar harm. She had learned firsthand that true love isn't manipulation or lies, but respecting the other person's freedom and happiness. Emily's married life was going well, and Ryan was looking forward to college with a bright future ahead. Even when the family changed form, they were bound by true love and trust. Rebecca had overcome the pain of the past and found happiness in the true sense of the word.